Good afternoon, everybody. I grew up in a tiny town in Utah. My graduating class had exactly 52 people in it. And it was the kind of town that most people didn't leave. And for women, there was really no expectation that you would go to college. And in fact, two of my closest friends in high school ended up graduating from high school with at least one child. And that easily could have happened to me, considering both that my mother and my sister both graduated from high school with children. It was my brother who was my window to the world, both the good parts and the bad parts. The good parts were things like taking me and my Barbies to my very first theatrical production. It was at the Egyptian Theater in Park City, Utah, and it was Peter Pan. And I'll never forget how fascinated I was watching those actors literally fly across the stage and trying to figure out exactly how they did it. Later I would find out it was wires. He also introduced me to things that just simply didn't exist in the little town where we grew up. Things like vegetarians, Episcopalians, Democrats, and he also introduced me to the first person of color that I ever met. Those were the terrific things. But through him and through his window, I also saw the ugly side of the world. And that was the side of watching my brother run home from school, being chased by bullies who were throwing rocks at him and calling him names like queer, faggot, fag, princess, and homo. It was also watching him go to a school board meeting one night during high school and asking the school to provide more funding for the arts, speech, and debate. And probably 2 days after that, he was getting the mail for my mom after he was driving home from work when a bunch of football players stopped him and violently beat him. They had been told by the high school football coach that my brother went to the school board meeting and tried to take away funding for the football program. Because you have to remember, in small towns, football is everything. I remember my parents being afraid for my brother's life. And I was 8 years old, and I was afraid for his life too. So like any good parents, my parents went to the high school to have a conversation with the principal about the bullying and the violence that my brother was experiencing. The principal, who was also the high school football coach. Again, small towns. Some of you may know them. After that meeting, the principal really provided no meaningful assurance to my parents about what was going to happen next and any kind of protection that my brother might have. And so my parents did what they had to do. They kept my brother in the school. They really had no choice. It was the only school within 30 miles of our house, and my parents went to that meeting not knowing what their rights were, and they didn't have an advocate at all. Thankfully, my brother survived the last year and a half of his high school experience. And he went on to be the first person in our family to go to college. So when I graduated from high school, my little 52-person class, it was my brother who I contacted to help me navigate my way around the University of Utah, which is where I decided to go to college. I was the only person from my high school class who did. It was my brother who that summer of 1990 literally walked me from classroom to classroom, building to building, with my schedule to try to make sure that I was comfortable and that I knew exactly where I was going. He took my hand and showed me this way and that way, and he also told me, here's the student union and here's where this is and that is. But the most important thing to me, of course, was knowing how to get from classroom to classroom to classroom. So on my first day of school, there I was with my backpack loaded with absolutely everything I own, of course. And I started to make my way from classroom to get through my day. At some point, I found myself at the top of a hill, standing on a short embankment wall, realizing this was probably not the right way to go, and clearly not the way that my brother had shown me. He was really good with directions, but anyone who knows me, particularly my husband, knows that I am terrible with maps and directions. So even though my brother had done a really good job showing me exactly where to go, There I was on the top of this hill, standing on the top of this wall with my loaded backpack on my back. And it wasn't long after that I ended up at the bottom of the hill, off the wall, laying on my back with my backpack, looking like a turtle with a shell, trying to get up quickly, of course, because I didn't want anyone to see me. And I remember laying there thinking to myself, man, this is my first day, and if this is what things look like on my cross-campus commute with my brother's help, I can't imagine what it would have looked like without his help. 16 short months later, I would find out exactly what life looked like without him. At age 28, he died of the HIV virus, the virus that causes AIDS. The last chapter of his life was written for him by his estranged partner who purposely and knowingly exposed him to the HIV virus. As a result, my brother wasn't there in 1993 when I was sitting in my mass communications law class with my professor, and he pulled me aside at the end of the class and asked me, "Hey, have you ever considered going to law school?" And I remember looking at him blankly and saying, "No, I haven't." At that point, I was 21 years old. I'd never met a lawyer. I'd certainly never met a female lawyer, and I'm not even sure if I'd seen one on TV at that point. This was pre-Ally McBeal days, so I'm not even sure if there was one on TV, and that certainly was probably not the best one to watch. Had my brother been there for that conversation and that question, he would have jumped all over it and told me, absolutely, you've got to go for it. You should be a lawyer. Because he was the one who throughout my life told me as a little girl, growing up, that I could do anything that I wanted to do. And 20 years later, after that conversation with my mass communications law professor, I would find myself being named the managing partner and the first female managing partner of a large national law firm here in Phoenix. My brother would have loved that. That one question from my professor, and I'm sure a guiding hand from my guardian angel brother, led me to law school, which led me to Phoenix, which led me to my current law firm, Quarles & Brady, which led me to my husband, who was a former lawyer at Quarles & Brady. And 10 years after meeting him, and 4 elections later, he was lucky enough to become the mayor of the 5th largest city in America. And with that, he grabbed the bully pulpit as the leader of the city of Phoenix. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do as the self-proclaimed First Lady of Phoenix. And that was to grab what I affectionately called my mini anti-bully pulpit. And with that, I set out to work on the issue of bullying and childhood safety issues in schools. Now, at first, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but what I did know was that this was my opportunity to honor my brother's life. And through Stop Bullying Arizona, the organization that I founded, we have done some amazing things in the state of Arizona to combat bullying and to help with school safety. We brought the world's leading expert on bullying to Arizona. We built an amazing collaboration with ASU, and we've counseled countless schools about how to really up their game when it comes to bullying prevention and child well-being. But the thing that's been most gratifying in that work that I have found is to be able to take that call from a parent or a grandparent who's standing in the exact same place that my parents were standing about 30 years ago with my brother, scared, alone, and not knowing what to do. These are parents who would call me because their child is being bullied because they have cancer and they've lost their hair through chemotherapy. Or parents that are calling me because their child is gay and they're being bullied, or they're overweight, or they have a disability. And what's been most gratifying for me through that work and those opportunities is to be able to say to them something that was never said to my parents 30 years ago. And that's to say, I know what you're going through. I've been there. We're going to keep your child safe, and we have your back. Thank you so much.